Hey, hello there, everybody. This is William Cunningham of My Hope in Marriage at myhopeinmarriage.com. But you can call me Reggie. My Hope in Marriage endeavors to provide resources for people to use to help them forge a happy and successful, fulfilling marriage. Um, Again, you can visit us on the web at www.myhopeinmarriage.com. In this lesson, check me out. I do a lot of teaching. In this article, in this video, I want to talk about something that has come up a lot. A lot. You know, I get emails, I get comments, I go to different forums and I read articles and so forth. And I see certain things happening over and over and over. And being a guy and being, really sensitive and in tune to the male's perspective on marital things, I find that there are a lot of guys who are struggling, who are in a bad marriage and are frustrated and tired of it. So we're going to talk about today is this. This is the question. Should I stay in an unhappy marriage? Should I stay in an unhappy marriage? Now, this is for men and women, of course, but I'm going to speak, as I tell you all the time, that I'm going to speak from a man's perspective because I'm a guy and I can relate. But just realize that most things that I say goes both ways. You know, a woman could ask, should I stay in an unhappy marriage? I'm not happy in this marriage. Just as a guy may ask, should I stay in this unhappy marriage? There are lots of people who are in a marriage that have been unhappy, unfulfilling, frustrating, stressful, you name it. And it could have lasted for decades. They could have been in that situation for decades. All right. So, and they get to a point, you're human, and you get to a point where you're like, you know what? I've had enough of this. It's not getting better. It doesn't look like it's going to get better. Should I stay or should I leave? Should I stay or should I leave? Now, from a guy's perspective, you got to think, 12 times about that because divorce could lead to a whole set of problems that are magnitudes higher than your unhappy marriage. For example, a guy can suffer extreme financial loss of access to his children because of the biasness in our court systems. And I'm going to start doing more research in that and talking to lawyers to see what can guys do to help protect himself or to help to mitigate those types of problems if divorce is in the horizon, if divorce does happen, even if the woman is the one that initiates the divorce. And from statistics, the last statistics that I saw, 80% of divorces are initiated by women. All right, so you're in this unhappy marriage. It's not getting better. You've tried everything, and it's just you're just frustrated. I've had enough. I may want to salvage my life. I want to salvage the rest of my life, and I want to perhaps separate myself, get a divorce, or what should I do to take care of me? What should I do if I'm in an unhappy marriage? Should I leave? Okay. Now, let's ask ourselves this question, though. This is important because I believe that there's one thing that really exacerbates the bad marriage situation, and that is that you didn't take the time to determine if the person you are going to propose to is really the person you want to marry. Do you really want to do it? Okay, so what is marriage? Now, there are two ways of looking at or that question. One is, what did God design marriage to be? And when you look at that, you'll see it's a lot different from what people expect. All right. Anyway, what did God have in mind, so to speak, regarding marriage? What did God want marriage to be? And also, you have to ask yourself, which most people, I would say, or maybe many people do not ask or do not at least think about, what does their spouse or their spouse to be expect from them in a marriage? What does this person, what does that other person, what does your mate, your fiance or your soon to be fiance, what would they expect in marriage? What do you expect in marriage? And you have to verbalize that, okay? Okay, so now the Bible, if you go to the Bible and you go to Genesis chapter 2, starting at verse 20, and I'm going to read it here, um, starting at verse 20, and we're going to go to verse 24. It says, the man gave names to all the cattle and to the birds of the sky and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper suitable for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that place. The Lord God fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from the man and brought her to the man. The man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now, when people go into marriage, they're not really thinking about that. This Bible verse indicates that marriage, as far as God's original design, was companionship. All right, not about making you happy. It didn't say that God brought the woman to him because the man was sad. And he shouldn't be sad, so I'm going to bring a woman to make him happy. I didn't say anything about that. It says God said that there was no helper for him. The animals, they had male and female, they were together as couples, but not the dude, not the man. So God created the woman to be his companion, to be his helper. And that's what God intended marriage to be the helper, to have an environment to be fruitful and multiply. All right? Okay? So that's, from a biblical perspective, marriage is about companionship, not happiness. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now, another important thing is to realize that in a marriage, the husband and wife have their expectations. They have their own expectation of, a man, he may not realize that he even has it. It's just this internal expectation that he has derived from, watching his parents or the way he was raised or what he observed as he was growing up. And she, the same thing. She has expectation based on, what she experienced growing up as far as husband and wife interaction. So you have to remember that is also a factor in what is a marriage. What do you expect the marriage to be? What does your spouse expect the marriage to be? And therefore, what does your spouse expect you to do in that marriage relationship? And if those aren't verbalized, if you don't talk about those things, then those expectations can go unmet for decades. And you get frustrated with each other because you're not meeting my desires, you're not meeting my expectations. And that says nothing about the fact that you change over the years. Maybe you were attracted by a certain thing of your spouse, whatever that may be, maybe, looks or the body or intelligence or whatever. And over the years, that wanes in your spouse. Maybe she shows she's not interested in baseball anymore, whatever the case may be. And things change. So that could change your outlook of the way you look at your spouse. All right. So you got to consider all those things. And I think one of the biggest problems that people have in their marriage is caused by the fact they didn't take enough time, or they really didn't put an effort, a true effort, in ensuring or somehow qualifying that is indeed the person that I want to marry. Right now, of course, you don't know you know, you can't really tell the future, but you can at least make an attempt to determine, to qualify that this is the person I want to marry. You don't want to get married and find out that this person, you know, loves, I don't know, hunting and killing animals, or they love the some religion and you weren't even aware of. Now all of a sudden it comes out. All right. So you need to spend the time to realize or determine what marriage is to both of you and talk about it. And you should remember what God intended marriage to be, and that is lifelong companionship. God never intended divorce. Jesus told us that. Paul said that. God never intended for us to be divorced, but it happens. Does it mean it's the end of the world? No. Sometimes it's probably the best thing for the relationship, especially when the husband or the wife checks out. You know, there could be infidelity, there could be abandonment of the relationship, even if you're still living in the same house, so forth and so on. All right. All right. So now I want to talk real quick about happiness in marriage. The mistake that we make is we think that marriage is about making us happy. You expect to be happy in your marriage. Of course you do. I don't think people go into marriage not thinking that it's going to make them, or at least going to contribute to their happiness. They're not going to be happy about the marriage. I'm sure most people think that their marriage, thinking about my marriage and looking back on my marriage, and I'm thinking, I'm so glad I did that, man. That was a good thing to do. Instead of, like in a lot of cases, you look back on your marriage based on the problems that you have and the issues that you've been having for years, and you are wondering, why did I do it? All right. So, you could be unhappy about your marriage. Let's say from a guy's perspective, he may be unhappy about his marriage because his wife consistently refuses to have sex with him. She consistently rejects him, or she doesn't respect him consistently, especially in public. She is a horrible cook. She doesn't clean. She doesn't work with me. She doesn't work with him. She's not interested in the things that I am or the things that the husband is interested in. All right. And this goes on for years, and he may internalize that and personalize that and make it about him and consider that his wife is rejecting him. And that, makes him unhappy. And of course, the wife can say the same thing. She may have her things, different things that may make her unhappy from her husband, because of what her husband is doing and in the relationship. Now, a big problem in marriage, and I remember a statistic that I saw. I don't remember the numbers, but most people think that love is a good reason to marry someone. I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for a week, so I think we should get. I think we should get married. No. I remember my father told me that love is not a good reason to get married. Because think about it, when the love that I'm talking about here is that emotional thing, and that's going to wane. That can wane, especially when people go into marriage. They don't really think about, hey, this is a relationship that requires maintenance to be successful. Like anything else, you have to manage how you deal with your fellow employees. You have to manage how you interact with your boss. You have to manage all of that. But in marriage, we just think it'll just happen. Okay. So you can fall out of love, emotional. You can lose that emotional connection. You can lose that affection that you once had for your girlfriend, now your wife. And, that can cause a heap of damage on the relationship because you don't feel the same way. So you're going to start expressing that in one way or another. Maybe you don't want to hold hands anymore. Maybe you don't really feel like kissing anymore, or whatever. So you got to keep that in mind. That that a big mistake that people make is the fact that they marry someone and they don't really know what they're getting into. And I would dare say that sometimes you marry someone that you probably should not have married. All right. And now you're in this relationship, and now you're discovering a whole lot of stuff that you probably should have had at least an indication of before you got married. All right. So love is not a good reason to get married. And you want to confuse that because there are two types of love in a marriage. And I deal with this in my ebook, What Happens to Love in Marriage. And I really strongly recommend that you get, of course, because I wrote it, but it's really very, very helpful in understanding what does happen to love in marriage. And there are two types of love in marriage. There's commitment, and then there's that emotional love. And I don't want to get too much into that because that's beyond the scope of this. But just remember that, you know, you want to be committed to the relationship. You want to be committed to the companionship. And as far as happiness, remember, marriage is not designed to make you happy. You make yourself happy. You are responsible for your own happiness, not your spouse. You may have a laundry list of things that your wife is doing wrong and that's not making you happy. Well, it's not her responsibility to make you happy. And furthermore, I would dare say it's not necessarily, it is not the woman's job to cook and clean. Who said that? Whoever cleans, clean. You live in a house, somebody's got to clean. Now, if you were a bachelor, you'd clean. You should both participate in the household. Now, I don't want to get into that, but that could be an expectation of a guy. My wife has to cook. She has to clean. She has to iron my underwear. All right, that's not her job. You know, she may have grown up where the father did all the cleaning. You know, so you have these expectations in marriage, and these expectations that don't get met make you unhappy, and then you blame your spouse because you got this laundry list of expectations that they're not meeting. Wrong. Okay? You are responsible for your own happiness, and you should definitely communicate your expectations, what's bothering you in the relationship so that you can work it out. And if you're two responsible adults, you can work it out because you can work things out in other things. If you have a conflict on your job, you're going to work it out. Okay, so why shouldn't you give that kind of effort and more to someone you vow to be with for the rest of your life? All right, we got to prioritize our marriage. All right, so there's an article, that accompanies this video on the website. You'll see it. Should I leave an unhappy marriage? Okay, so we know marriage is not designed to make you happy. Relieve your spouse of the responsibility of your happiness, and just expect her, if anything else, to be your companion. But then you still have to talk about what does that look like? Because what a companion is to me may be different to what my wife thinks a companion is. All right. So you have to, that's why communications is so important for your marriage or any relationship. Now, one thing you want to be sure you're doing is working on yourself. Work to make yourself a better version of you. All right. Have a clear conscience. Whatever you do after enduring an unhappy marriage, work on yourself and make sure you have a clear conscience that you really tried, that you really made an effort to make it better. And perhaps your spouse really doesn't care anymore. Perhaps she really doesn't want to be bothered for whatever reason. Who knows? Maybe she really wasn't invested in the marriage in the first place. And once the children has, gone through school, now she doesn't have that raison d'etre, if I remember French correctly, but she doesn't have that reason for living anymore, or per se, the reason for the relationship. So now she's like, I'm stuck with you. Or, the wife can say the same thing, or the husband can say the same thing. All right. So work on yourself. Make yourself a better version of you. Do the things that make you happy and stop giving your wife or your husband that responsibility. You'll find that you'll have a better attitude, and you might even be more attractive to them in your, growing confidence and your growing lit aura. Okay. All right. Now, so then regardless, whatever you do later, if the marriage is still unhappy and you're like, I'm tired of this, whatever you decide, you can at least say, look, I tried. I tried to make myself a better husband. I tried to make myself a better person. I tried to do all I can, but she's just not into this relationship or he's not into this relationship. I'm going to do something now. Whatever that is. I'm not suggesting that you should do, that you should get divorced or that you should even stay. You do what you decide to do based on truth, being reasonable, and so forth. All right. Okay. So, should you leave an unhappy marriage? Well, I'm sure you've heard that, you should leave toxic people. Get those people out of your relationship. And I used to wonder, well, what if your spouse is that toxic person? What if your spouse is that negative person that you're supposed to avoid? What do you do then? In a marriage, you have this commitment, you have this vow. It's not like if it's just person in your life in the neighborhood or a friend that you can just stop associating with them. It's hard to stop associating with your spouse when you live in the same house. All right. So that's a question that I used to ask myself a lot. But it still goes without saying, even if your spouse is toxic, you got to do something to limit that toxicity on your life. All right. Should you leave a marriage that's just unhappy for decades? You're tired of it, man. Your wife is just about the children. Your wife is really about her job. All she talks about is the children and her job in church. And you're like, I just want my wife. You see, ladies, men want their wives. They want a relationship. They really want their wives. You may think, a lot of women think that men just want sex. And if they don't get sex, then they're unhappy and they want to leave and all that kind of stuff. No, 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 no. Sex is a way you connect with your wife to a guy. That's a way you connect emotionally to your wife. And when you deprive him of that, you're not just depriving him of sex because, truth be told, if I can just say from a pragmatic standpoint, or just factual, a guy don't need you. Your husband don't need you to have sex. All right. you're just the preferred source of that activity. All right. So what you're depriving him of is not just a sexual physical act, it's that connection that he so craves. He wants to be connected to his wife, and you're depriving it. Or wife, your husband, guys, your wife wants to be connected to you, and you're depriving her. You're pushing her away. And this could go on for decades and decades, and finally somebody says that's enough and they want to leave. So I'm not going to say you should leave, especially for the guys, because divorce could bring on a whole slew of problems that you don't want to deal with. That's far worse than just being in an unhappy marriage. So I would encourage you to try to work it out. Try to make your marriage a better one. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Pray to God for wisdom. Pray to God for understanding. Pray to God to help you because you have Him on your side. He wants you to have a good marriage. He wants you to have a fulfilling marriage. He wants you two to be companions. So at least you got God on your side. So go to Him and ask for help. Don't just throw in the towel. Okay, you burnt my food 5 times. I'm getting a divorce. No, no, you can't. You shouldn't do that. You should try. Your conscience should be clear in whatever you do that I've done X, Y, and Z. You might even want to talk to other people or marriage counselor or marriage coach, especially maybe a marriage coach or something like that, to help you to determine how to get this thing right. What are some effective things that you can do to make your marriage a better marriage, to make it an unhappy marriage? Okay. All right. So that's what I want to say. I wanted to say that because, a lot of times we go through years and years of problems and we're unhappy. But I truly believe that you take responsibility for your own happiness and stop putting it on your spouse. If your spouse disrespects you, you don't want anybody to disrespect you. But if your spouse doesn't meet your expectations, okay, she or he doesn't meet your expectations. But you go and you do what you need to do to fulfill your life and to bring happiness to your life. And also remember that marriage isn't about happiness. I would even dare say that life isn't really about happiness. You're going to have happy and unhappy moments in life. But more than anything, you want to be fulfilled. You want to have meaning in your life. And you are responsible for living the life that God has, I should say, programmed you or equipped you to live. All right. So whether you stay in the marriage or whether you go, if your marriage is unhappy for a long period of time, you may decide to stay. You may decide to leave. But whatever you do, have a clear conscience, but always take care of you the whole time. Be your own source of happiness. All right. Well, this is William Cunningham, but you can call me Reggie of My Hope in Marriage. I pray that this video, this topic has helped you or enlightened you or get you to think about certain things. You can visit us on the web at www.myhopeinmarriage.com. I do want you to have a happy marriage. I do want you to have a fulfilling marriage. All right. And it's going to take work. So work at it. All right. God bless you and be blessed.